official Night Shift starter pack. Today's episode is brought to you by the incredible edible egg. The American Egg Council. Shout out to all of our members. Thank you all for being members. Thank you all for supporting the channel. And a big special shout out to, let's see. Come on now. I just had this list open. Oh man, I should never have closed it, but I did. And now I can't find it again. Here we go. Quick channel updates. We are sitting pretty at 20,939 channel subscribers. We picked up 1,106 new subs in just the last 28 days. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of the subscribers who just came on board. If you're one of that 1,106 new subscribers who just joined, thank you for being here. Thanks for being a part of what we're trying to do. What are we trying to do? Good question. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. But I think at the heart of it, what we're mostly trying to do is have relevant, substantive discussions about the broader implications of the reality that non-human intelligence is real. It's here. There's probably more than one kind. They probably want multiple different things. They may or may not be friendly. I don't care what anybody says. We do not know that yet. And it's going to change a lot. It's going to impact our society in major, huge ways. So, along with a bunch of other things that are all happening at the same time. So it's a very interesting moment we find ourselves in, and a very precarious one. And so if we're trying to do anything here at Night Shift, we're trying to take a little time to have that chat. And I know if any of you out there are in a similar position to where I am, you occasionally find it hard to find other people to talk to about this stuff, because it is weird. I get it. It's super weird, and that's okay. But if your friends, family, and coworkers are sick and tired of hearing you go on and on about it, that's okay. You can come here and hang out with us, and we'll try to get to the bottom of this whole thing. My goal is to solve UFOs by the end of this year. I think we're on our way. So with any luck, we'll get there together. So that's the channel news. We're sitting pretty at 20,939. Hopefully, with any luck, we'll break 21,000 subscribers by tonight or tomorrow. So thanks to everybody for subscribing. Thank you all for being here. You guys are the heartbeat of Team Night Shift. And shout out to all of our 6 months and longer members. These are members who have been part of Team Night Shift from the jump. Anthony Haley, Stephanie Erickson, Brett Higgins, Teresa Bailey, producer Brandon, Thistle's Last Stand, Bearded UFO Guy Gaz, Shadow Patriot Terry, Zendra Zero, Goldbridge, EMG, Alminius, Dr. Arfuzz, Paging Dr. Arfuzz, Joseph, Christopher A. Huff, Christian Dane, Heather Willow, Proud Vermin, Chris Hovord, Pack Rat, Avi Z, Fight Trader, Brian Jackson. Hi, Brian. Brian's watching. Sage Sleuth, KT. Thank you all for being members for so long. You guys are, and also Chris is on the mod squad. He's one of the leaders of our mod squad, Chris and Brett. Shout out to them. You'll find them in the chat and on the Discord, along with Xander Jones. Xander, I hope you're watching. If you are, hi, I hope you're feeling better. Guys, send some vibes, some good vibes Xander's way. He's been sick, and he's got the strep. And he was texting me about it. Xander, can I tell him you wound up in the hospital with the strep? I think that's where you said you were, right? It was really bad. So he's super sick. And if any of you have ever had a case of strep go sideways on you, it's awful. It's god awful. So he assured me he'll be back in action on Friday. So we'll see Xander back here Friday. And in the meantime, it's just us hanging out, holding down the fort. Chris Hovord, super chat, Night Shift all the way. Thanks, Chris. Oh man, you don't have to do that. Chris is he's always going above and beyond. You don't have to do that, man. Thank you for the super chat. You're a scholar and a gentleman. Jamie or Jaime, Zagazeta. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you for the super chat. And who else? E1000 Molnar. Welcome, new member. It's great to have all of you here. If you've been watching the news the last couple of days, things have gotten really weird and interesting. It's very exciting stuff. And it's interesting to watch the UFO community react to a firsthand whistleblower after all this time. Everybody's been asking for firsthand witnesses, people who've actually seen the craft. I want to talk to somebody who's seen something. Damn it. Get me a firsthand witness. None of this bullshit second, third hand information. I want to talk to the guy who was there. In fact, I want to talk to the guy who moved the shit from place A to place B. Can we get him on the phone? Oh, Ross, Jake Barber's here. Come right in. Now suddenly Jake Barber's not good enough. He's not good enough. Reddit shredded Jake Barber. I just dipped in. I dipped my toes into Reddit. I had to jump back because I got burned by all the negative vibes out there. People bitching and whining about, oh, it looks like an egg on a string. That's because it is. It's an egg on a string. I get it, though. The video is not what people thought they were going to see. And I'm sure most, if not all of you have already seen it, but we'll take a look at it again in a minute. Some thoughts on this. This is what I've been saying since the beginning, though. It's never going to be what you think it is. Whatever it actually is always going to be an order of magnitude weirder or more different or just out of sync with where you think it's going to go, because it is a complete unknown to us here on the ground, like the rest of us. We're not in the program. We don't have firsthand knowledge ourselves. So we're relying on our own interpretation of what's going on, things we've heard from other people in Hollywood. And we're making up this idea of what we think it all is about in our head. And I'm not doing anything differently. I'm doing the same thing you guys are doing. I just have more time, I think, than a lot of people to do it. And I can do it at a professional level. At least I hope so. So when you see the real thing, it's going to look weird to you. It's always going to look weird to you. And that seems to be what most people took away from it, at least insofar as I was able to gather from looking at the comments on Reddit and the various forums on like our UFO and our aliens. I'm assuming some of this activity, probably more than a little and less than a lot, or more than a lot and less than all of it, is targeted bot activity. Maybe at least some percentage of it is just bots spamming the negative comments to really drive the story down. But I think there's more to this story than meets the eye initially anyway. I think there's more going on here. So, yeah, that's kind of, that's at first blush. That's kind of what I took away. What do you guys think in the chat? Let's see here. Matthew Kane says, pretty freaking wild. Please get into the fact that he started his own defense contracting company that is capturing their own UFOs. Dave Schmidt says, you got to pick a different track, brother. You have a whole album to choose from. That's true, but that's our theme. Heather says, I believe him. People think experiences can convey this to people who haven't experienced it. You have to experience it to get it. Who else? Let's see. Wendy Wu says, I believe him, and that egg does look heavy. Not a balloon to me, but what do I know? That's true. What do any of us know, really, right? We don't know. Cosmic Serpent says, my friend's mother and her relatives saw a close landing, beings exiting the craft in 1964 in Finland. Wow. Can you imagine? See, like, think about that. How weird. This is why I think a lot of experiencers don't come forward or have trouble coming forward and talking about what they've seen, because when you finally get the thing that you think you want, right? Like imagine there's a lot of people who are like, oh man, I'd love to go on board a UFO. I'd love to go on board a UFO. And then you talk to somebody who's been abducted and they're like, no, you don't want to be in this club at all. This is awful. This is an awful thing. So it's like the people who have really seen it, and then the people who think they want to see it, and when they finally do see something that's just so bizarre and out of the norm for them, it's hard to even grapple with. Like how do you put it into words? But wow, to see a landing and beings exiting the craft, that's pretty interesting. Stephen Daedalus says, let's be honest, Ross did an amazing job, but was kind of confusing to have footage and Jake, but the footage not being what Jake saw in his job. I mean, when he flew his helo. Dave Roscoe says, that object could have been anything, though. Dropped on the ground. Why not a truck? Could have been training exercise. Possibly, yeah. So I even think, so from what I can see here in our chat, it looks like you guys are kind of mixed on this too. So, and that's okay. We should have mixed opinions on this. We should have questions about everything all the time. We should really be exercising our critical thinking skills. But I thought it was really interesting, aside from the video itself, which is, I thought was kind of, I guess what I expected to see was like body cam footage of a SEAL team going up to a crashed UFO, and like you see debris and there's stuff around. The last thing I expected to see was like a down angle night vision camera of a rope holding an egg, which was kind of interesting. So it kind of caught me by surprise, but at the same time, Jake Barber checks out. You know, it's an older code, but it checks out, and he does have impeccable credentials. And it's weird to watch the fallout from this because, at least as far as I could tell, Stephen Greer is like scrambling to figure out how to spin this somehow. And he just put out a podcast just today, and I've only watched the first few minutes of it, so I can only react to the first part that I saw. I just didn't have time to watch the whole thing yet, but it's an interesting first 15. I will show you the first 5, and then you guys can decide if you want to watch the rest of it from there. But I think you should. It's interesting. Let's see, what order do I want to do this in? Broad strokes. We got a first-hand whistleblower. He checks out. He came forward. The video is legit. That's what everybody wanted. Check. In the interview, not only did he seem super freaked out about the whole situation, but he also got choked up and weirdly emotional when he talked about it, which I thought was very telling. Something in particular stood out to me. The psionics team. Ross asked us a very specific question at one point. We'll watch this clip in just a second, but he goes, how did this craft come to be where it was when you retrieved it? And he said, Jake Barber says, I believe it was invited to land there by the psionics team. And to be perfectly honest with you, I forgot all about UFOs at that point because I was laser locked on psionics team. Psionics team. Think about that. We have teams of telepaths that interface and work with our retrieval teams. What? Like, remote viewing is one aspect of this whole thing, and I believe strongly in it, and I think remote viewing is real. But it's really fascinating that we're hearing so much about telepathy just lately, don't you think? Like the Telepathy Tapes podcast has brought this into the mainstream in a new and interesting way. And you have Jake Barber talking about telepathic communication, not only between the psionics team, whoever they are, and the craft or whatever is on board the craft piloting it. We don't know if it's an actual being on board the craft or if the craft itself was responding in some sort of conscious way, but it seems like there was some kind of a conscious control of the craft that was brought into play. And it was able to communicate, or at least one of these craft was able to communicate with Jake Barber. But if we have a psionics team, that means that there's a training school for these guys. That means there's a training protocol. That means it's a teachable skill, more or less, right? Like there's a book that Ingo Swann wrote called ESP for Everybody, or Everybody's Guide to ESP. Everybody's Guide to Natural ESP, Unlocking the Extrasensory Power of Your Mind by Ingo Swann. And according to Ingo and a number of other people, I think Lou has even alluded to this, Elizondo, most people have some kind of telepathic ability. We just don't realize it. Or maybe we do realize it, but we just write it off as like internal chatter inside your head. Think about how many times a day you might be actually picking up psychic vibes or communications from other people that are just in the area around you, like radios turned on or like speakers playing sound, and you're picking this stuff up. It's a greater than zero. It's got to be. So are some people, it just raises all these other questions, right? If there's a psionics team, are there different levels of psychic ability? Are some people born with a more powerful sense of this than other people? Gary Nolan talks about the caudate putamen, which they can identify in a brain scan, and they can point to that and say that people that have a particular set of features in their scan tend to be or seem to be more telepathic than other people, I guess. It's my really weak understanding of his explanation of it. But then that might suggest that there's a special recruiting arm for just people with telepathic ability. Like, where's the pipeline? And how do you get onto the psionics team? Where do those guys come from? That's really interesting to me. So the fact that he even said that, and it kind of formalized this whole term, it took it to a new level, because we've known about military and intelligence remote viewers in the past. That's been around for like ever. But this is a very different concept, a psionics team that is actually able to reach out and communicate with a craft, entice it to land, get it to go to a specific area. All these other questions come up, like, are these craft remotely piloted? Is a living creature on board? Are these psionic soldiers interacting with the craft itself or the pilot of the craft? Like, what does all that actually mean? People like Chris Bledsoe can seemingly summon orbs at will. So is that kind of what's going on here? And is that why the military and NASA and all these intelligence folks took such an interest in Chris Bledsoe? Because maybe he's actually a powerful telepath and he just doesn't realize it. He encountered an egg-shaped craft very similar to what Jake Barber described. And he writes about it in his book, UFO of God. He talks about it. There's this egg-shaped craft that chased their truck. Very, very weird. Very interesting stuff. So the psionics team I thought was really interesting. In terms of the actual video itself, I think if I remember right, Jake Barber said that he experienced all kinds of radiation sickness after this event, right? Like he said his hair fell out, all of the hair on his body. He said the skin on his arms was falling off. He said it was just like coming off, like peeling off. Not like a sunburn, but like a radiation burn. Gary Nolan looked at his report and said that it was basically inconsistent with radiation poisoning or radiation exposure. So my question is, that egg was hanging from a rope, and at the end of the rope was a tarp that was wrapped around the egg. Who put the tarp on the egg, and what happened to those guys? That's what I want to know. Someone had to walk up to that thing and then hook it up to the line, right? They can't just it's not like the claw machine at the mall, right? Where they just fly over and grab it with a Inspector Gadget claw. it had to be picked up. So it had to be harnessed first. And then the helicopter had to come into place and somebody had to guide the line up and then click it into place. And then they haul this thing off. So what happened to the guys that got right up next to the craft and probably had to touch it? I guess they had to, right? And like walk around it and hook it up to this rig. I'd be very interested to know how that actually works and what that whole process is like. Stephen Daedalus says, I'm just checking the chat here. Stephen Daedalus 74 says, the main problem with the interview for me was how emotional and freaked out he was. And the weirdest part, psionics, divine feminine spirit possessed him. I mean, I believe him, but skeptics? Yeah. Xander Jones says, the psionics in theory have the ability to take control of the craft and land it themselves or bring it into view and hold it so it can be shot down. Yeah, there's more to this story. There's a lot more to this than just the psionics and just the egg. There's more going on here. We're going to go there next. Obi-Wan, my favorite screen name. Obi-Wan Shinobi says the radiation poisoning was from the mystery box. Okay, so yes, I remember. You're right now. That's correct. The mystery box. Let's take a look at this clip of Jake Barber talking about the psionics team and the experience that he had. So if any of you out there haven't actually seen this, we'll take a look at it now, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so let's see. We're on which... Here we go.
Let's slow this down to take a closer look. That's an egg-shaped UAP suspended from a 150-foot long line. We're told the craft is about 20 feet long. The egg suspended in a cradle. And look how careful the pilot is as they bring their precious cargo into land. Let's freeze frame here to look at one of the clearest images of a UAP ever taken. This is no blurry light in a distant sky. The source of the footage putting themselves at incredible risk to record this UAP retrieval. Look at how perfectly smooth the craft is. No markings at all, and no visible means of propulsion or way to see inside. Watch how it rolls, almost graceful as it hits the ground, despite being wrapped in the ropes and canvas from the cradle as it's dropped for pickup.
Somebody on Reddit, this actually did make me laugh, recreated this video with their iPhone and a string and an egg and some like masking tape. They like taped an egg to a piece of string and they held it from their iPhone and they like dropped it on the carpet of their living room. And to be fair, it does look very similar to this. So I as much as they were taking the piss, I thought this was was pretty funny.
The UAP's final destination still unknown.
So there was another object. There's two objects that I'm here to talk about. One was the egg. The other is what we called an 8-gon. The 8-gon was essentially a flying disc with what looked like 8 delineated sections when looking down. And I can tell you what it looked like from looking down because that's primarily how I saw it because I'm a helicopter pilot. We did recoveries with the 8-gons. There was more than one that made its way to the ground on this particular operation.
Simply seeing a non-human craft up close would be an intense experience in itself. But Barber says as he prepared to transport that so-called 8-gon from the pickup site to the drop site, something even more intense happened to him that would change his life forever.
This is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life I'm about to share with you, so bear with me. So as I get closer to this pick site, I start feeling odd. I start feeling extremely emotional. And the closer I get, the more the emotion starts to overwhelm me. I feel this intense hybrid of sadness and happiness and beauty and song. And it was very disruptive to me because I had a very practical responsibility at the time to operate a helicopter in the mountains at night. And I began wondering what was wrong with me. It was late. I'm like, am I just stressed? Am I tired? And I don't know. But as I came over this object for the pick, there was this overwhelming sense of emotion.
Is it your feeling? Are you suddenly having a mental breakdown on the job?
No, I felt like something connected with me. I felt like something had tuned in to me and my soul and was providing me some sense of guidance on what to do and how profound what I was doing was. And it was so overwhelming that I began to cry. And then I'm confused as to why I'm crying at the same time. And then do I abort the mission? So I just did my best to focus on my particular cues when doing this type of work. And I got the load hooked up and I began flying away. And once it was just me and that object in between the pick and the drop site, there's about 20 miles in between, I felt like something was inside of me. I felt like I was possessed by the most beautiful spirit I'd ever been possessed by. And
was it loving?
It was loving. But there was a sense of sadness at the same time. And
had you ever had an experience like this before?
No, it was a very feminine energy, I'll tell you that. It felt like the spirit of God, but not in any masculine sense. And it wasn't like a soul, it was like a frequency that I was connected with. And whatever that force was since that night, it has stayed with me. And as crazy as this sounds, it's what's guiding me now. And it's what's providing protection for me.
It's changed.
That is exactly how Chris Bledsoe describes what happened to him. And that's super weird. Because Chris Bledsoe is also one of those really kind of like old school Southern guys, construction guy, carpenter, contractor, pilot, real nuts and bolts, practical, down to earth guy. I read his book. And his emotional reaction to the lady, what he describes the lady, his physical interaction, his face-to-face encounter with I guess, a being, an intelligence, at least. He described it as a feminine energy, feminine persona, and it appeared to him as a blonde woman in a glowing robe floating above the ground, like something... like the librarian from Ghostbusters, but cuter, I guess. And I think that is an astonishing data point. It caught me by surprise because I didn't expect this guy, who is a certified badass and just a total badass, to choke up. Although tough guys tend to, as Macho Man said it, Macho Man Randy Savage, I've soared with the eagles and I've slithered with the snakes. I've cried 1,000 times and I'll cry 1,000 more. Everybody cries. But it's interesting, the psychic connection and the emotional response that it evokes. I don't want to beat this horse any more than I already have, but I had my own personal experience years ago that informed a lot of how I see this whole phenomena. It was very powerful, very emotional, and it was a precognition event where I saw something that didn't happen it would happen years later, and it did, just as I was shown that it would, and I had this huge emotional reaction just like that. And I had the same connection. It was like a wavelength thing, like you tune into a frequency and then you can always hear it. Once you hear it, you can always hear it. And so we've heard this so many different times by so many different people. the consciousness aspect of this sits at or near the center of the UFO mystery. And I just think it's really fascinating that as UFO disclosure or the unveiling or the gradual, whatever you want to call it, awakening of people to this reality, as that unfolds, we're also learning more and more about our latent psychic potential that is sort of there. And it has probably just always been there, just beneath the surface, and we've just not looked at it. I know this is something that Pavel over at Psychoactivo is really devoted to, this idea. He explores it a lot at his channel. And I think that he's even said that this is something that people need to experience. Like, everyone should experience this at least once so that they know what they're dealing with. And I couldn't agree more. I think that that's something that, as we learn more and more about this, what if it just so happens that we find out that there is a way that you can teach yourself, or you can be taught, or you can be trained to hone your psychic ability? And what if, once we understand what that looks like and what it feels like, we can actually do it? You know, one time I heard this, I don't remember who it was, but maybe someone out there can check me on this. It was just this remark someone made, and they said, you know, no one had ever run a 4-minute mile until someone did. And I don't remember who the first person was who ran the 4-minute mile. But as soon as that person ran the 4-minute mile, the next year, it was something like 200 people ran a 4-minute mile. It was the knowledge that it was possible is what unlocked the capability to do it. But until you saw someone else do it, like many things, I imagine, you have to see someone else do it, and then you go, oh, it can be done. Then suddenly the belief triggers in you the capacity to visualize yourself doing it, and therefore you're able to do it. Or as Anthony Hopkins said in his seminal thriller, where he starred opposite Alec Baldwin, The Edge. What one man can do, another can do. For the other 4 people who saw that movie and remember it, that was for you. All right, so let's go a little deeper into this.
Stay with us.
Here we go.
He had an intense emotional reaction, which convinced him he'd connected telepathically with a non-human intelligence.
You're talking UFOs, flying saucers, and
That's probably one of the hardest conversations. That object, or whatever was controlling that object, was also connecting to me through my mind.
And so how did the object come to land?
I think it was invited to land by the psionics team.
Jake says his mission that night came from no accidental crash. The UAP was summoned by a separate team, a special team with special abilities. They're called psionics.
What is a psionic?
A psionic person is someone with a predisposition for extratemporal, you could say, abilities and sensitivities.
Extratemporal abilities, also known as psychic powers.
What did you discover the psionics were being used for in the program?
In the program, there was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps UAP could be summoned, could be communicated with, could be controlled, and could be persuaded to land, all by deploying people with psionic abilities.
And did you see that happen?
Yes, I did.
When a psionic operator engages with technology, how do they do it?
Using their mind, something like meditation.
There genuinely are people who can actually make a mental, spiritual connection to a technology.
Yes. 100%.
It all seems so far-fetched, psychically gifted humans linking with possibly alien ships, summoning them and even piloting them. But it isn't just Jake saying this. Don Paul, another decorated Special Forces operator and colleague of Jake's, says he's also seen what psionics can do.
I've had the pleasure of meeting multiple psionic assets. I've seen them function. I know that they're capable of doing what they're doing.
You can definitively say that you believe there is a capacity in the human mind to somehow psychically, telepathically connect.
Yes, and I don't know if it's a byproduct, if it's something that they were born with, but there is certain people who are quantifiably, verifiably capable of this.
It's an established fact that the Pentagon has had an interest in psychic abilities, what it calls remote viewing, for military purposes. The famed Project Stargate spent years studying the subject, and despite the CIA's official position that such studies yielded nothing, former Pentagon UAP investigator Lou Elizondo told me last year that psychic abilities are very real, and perhaps not very rare.
So this is an ontological shock, I think, for many people watching this, because we're all being told, firstly, there's no such thing as aliens visiting this planet, and secondly, there's no such thing as telepathy or psychic abilities. It's rubbish.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think there is going to be an ontological shock. I think it's going to be an ontological relief, because I think everyone deep down knows that there's more to life than what we are being told and experiencing. Like, not only is it not shocking, but it should be welcome.
It all seems...
That is so awesome. What an outstanding perspective. What an outstanding perspective that is. Ontological relief. CG in our chat, a super chat here, Barber sounded like an NDE. NDE is short for near-death experience, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, I think a lot of contact stories and a lot of NDEs basically read the same. In fact, it's almost like contact with non-human intelligence sometimes takes the shape or the form of a near-death experience. So you're in a car accident, or knock on wood, or something happens, and then you pass on, and then you visit the other side, and then you come back. Or, you know, so the people who do come back, they tell stories that are very similar to contactees. And they encounter, like Chris Bledsoe's lady, an angelic being, usually appearing in line with their own cultural background and religious beliefs and framework. Maybe that's not an accident. You know, there's an exchange of emotion, an exchange of knowledge, instantaneous, full, total, spatial, complete 360-degree awareness of understanding between two beings, almost like the Vulcan mind meld. So yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, CG, for that. I think you're right. Sounds very similar to an NDE. And I'm going to be talking to someone this week who hopefully can shed some light on that. We're going to be talking about experiencers and how they handle this stuff. Dave Roscoe says, I maintain the biggest motivation to keeping this secret is the psychic consciousness connection could destroy existing control structures. 1,000%. Can you imagine if it just became like a thing? What if it just became like hip? Like, it was like the new thing. Like, you could, once it's accepted, it becomes accepted or proven more and more that people can do this and demonstrate it more and more, then everyone's going to want to do it. And for those people who are disciplined enough and probably, you know, focused enough to take the time and train and figure out how to do it, then they will be able to, you know, get really good. And what kind of real life, real world results come from that? How does that work? I'm very curious to find out. I would sign up for that class in a heartbeat. Okay. Hang on, somebody was knocking at my door. All right, so that video was super interesting. He goes on to talk about this mystery box, and let's see if we can get to that.
Sacred. But hold on. Jake says that through his work, he and his team have suffered serious injuries.
After this particular mission, me and everyone on my team got extremely sick.
How sick?
Like physically ill in the hospital.
And one of the world's leading medical experts agrees.
My personal experience, both with people and the things that I've seen, is that there's something here.
Are UAPs bad for your health? Coming up next. Describes his encounters with UAP as transcendent, quasi-religious moments.
And from what you're saying, that's a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it was the most beautiful experience I've had in my life.
But he also says these encounters could come with a staggering cost. UAPs may have changed his life for the better. They may also have shortened it.
So what happened to you?
We're not quite sure. We were transporting a large sealed container.
Jake says nobody on his team was told what was in that container.
And we transported what we called mystery boxes all the time. I have no idea. It could have been empty. It probably wasn't empty, but we don't know what was inside the boxes.
And what were you told if somebody tried to seize that box? What were your orders?
We maintained the authority to use lethal force if anyone tried to seize those boxes.
So whatever that box was, it was extremely valuable
That's
to the
correct.
US government.
That's correct. And after this particular mission, me and everyone on my team got extremely sick, like physically ill in the hospital. Within weeks after this, I'd lost every hair on my body, and I also lost the skin on my arms.
So the skin's actually falling off your body?
Yeah, like not just falling off, like it was lopping off within a couple of days, like a severe sunburn. I ended up developing a severe heart murmur that I'd never had before.
Last year, I introduced Jake to Stanford immunology professor.
I know what was in the box. This is just a guess. Remember at the end of Indiana Jones where they go to the warehouse and it's all the crates, all the stuff, and then there's the Ark and it's in that box. He goes on the submarine in Raiders, remember? And it's melting through the box, it's burning it up. I think that's what it was the Ark. Okay, so lots of interesting stuff to unpack there. It sounds like an NDE. He has this very specific type of reaction to being near the craft. The egg, he has this telepathic connection with some form of intelligence that he describes as the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to him. He transports this thing called the 8-gon, which isn't that just an octagon? I mean, I don't know why you would call it an 8-gon, but an 8-sectioned disc, a disc made of 8 sections, and then a mystery box. And the mystery box obviously irradiated him in some weird way. And again, somebody had to go hook that cable up to the box. So what happened to those guys? What I want to know about the psychic connection and the telepathy, the demonstration of telepathy that he experienced. And this is where I'm a little skeptical of how this all works and what it means. It is often described as this transcendent spiritual event that is very loving and very overwhelming and emotional and powerful. And on the surface, if you look at the description of an event like that, it sounds very awe-inspiring and I guess overall positive. But what if that's just a form of psychic attack, right? Like imagine a superior intelligence that wants to disable you or influence you in some way, influence your actions, influence your thoughts, control you. There's no reason why flooding someone's mind with positive emotion couldn't be a form of attack, right? If as long as it gets the result that they want. like almost like a what's that fungus that takes over insects, some kinds of insects, and they drives them around like a zombie. What if the Bud Hopkins in Missing Time describes a scenario where a woman is abducted. She's on board a craft. She's freaking out. She wakes up on board the craft. She's on a table and she's losing it. She's losing her fucking mind. She's screaming. She's losing it. And this tall gray comes over from across the room and she sees this and she's freaking out. And it puts its hand on her forehead. And he describes this. He describes it in a bunch of presentations he does too. He does like live Q&As and he's talking about this. And he says, as soon as this being touched her forehead, she felt a wave of emotion. And she said she would die for this thing. She would give up her own children for this thing. Like she would do anything for it. And that sounded like a form of control, right? It sounds like although it felt like a very positive thing in the moment, let's see, can we stretch this Indiana Jones thing out a little bit? It's like in Temple of Doom. Remember in Temple of Doom where Indy gets hypnotized and he gets possessed by the demon and he's like all Kalima Shakti Day and he's going to take out the heart. He turns against everybody. And then they burn him with the torch and he snaps out of it. Something like that. So maybe there's more to this than meets the eye. I don't know. I'm not saying that I know it's a negative experience or it's a negative thing. I'm not just saying that. I'm just saying like, just because it sounds very positive and loving and sweet and amazing doesn't necessarily mean that's what it is. It could take that form, could appear that way, but in fact, it could actually be some other thing. Do I think that's likely? I don't know. I don't know. We're talking about aliens here. So anything goes, I guess. So interestingly, let's move on from this. I want to go to the Dr. Stephen Greer podcast. This came out today. This was, 17 hours ago. Excuse me. It's streamed live. And let's take a look at this. Now, real quick, as I said before at the top of the show, I haven't had a chance to watch this entire podcast. It's a whole hour. I just didn't have an hour free. It just came out today and my morning was too wild. So I only watched the first about 10, 15 minutes of it. But I think the first 5 minutes of it is interesting enough that I'm going to tease this episode out for you guys. And let's just watch the first 5 minutes and we'll react to this. I think it's really interesting what he says, but pay attention to what he says. And not only that, but how he says it. And look at his body language. Look at his whole presentation. See if you can spot anything interesting.
All right. Welcome to episode 3 of the Dr. Stephen Greer podcast. Dr. Greer, it's very good to connect with you today. Lots of exciting stuff happening. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I was up most of the night dealing with some of the fallout from the tabloid show that came out last night. And so I want to just comment on this a little bit. Jake Barber and I've worked together, and I first met him about a year and a half, maybe 20 months ago. He's a special forces guy who is also embedded with a major aerospace company. Now, I know what all those affiliations are. He did not disclose it. Now, the important part of what came out, if you take out all the other noise and the production itself on that News Nation show, is that he and a group of other people are beginning to put their toe in the water, releasing information and what they've been involved with in retrieving extraterrestrial vehicles, or the pop culture now, or government acronym term now is NHI, non-human intelligence craft. And there is a great deal more than what you saw in that episode. So the original plan, just to let people know what was originally thought to be done, and its evolution, some may say devolution over the last few months, is that there was going to be a collection of all that hard evidence of these operations, the craft, the operators, the locations, et cetera, and so on. And that was going to be done anonymously. They were not going to reveal who they were for OPSEC's operational security reasons and their own safety, both legally and personally. As you saw in the show, people have been killed. He didn't go into details. I know the details, and there have been recent fatalities related to these operations of people trying to come forward. And we're at this inflection point where we need these people to come forward full Monty, right? However, the problem is the United States government is lagging in instituting the protections, the executive orders, the congressional bills to protect and to make a pathway out of these operations that have been run illegally so that the people involved are not prosecuted. They have amnesty, they have physical protection, and there's a robust effort in law enforcement here and abroad to get these corrupt and illegal projects under control, which is a very heavy lift. There's a separate team that I'm advising is involved with that part of it. That's separate from Jake Barber and his whistleblower team. But I've introduced them, so they know each other. Now, the issue here becomes the commingling, and the whole title of this show really needs to be the disclosure mosaic. And I want to just unpack a little bit from a 35 years on into this perspective. And as I started out in this, I made a lot of mistakes. We still make mistakes. We're human. We're fallible. And what happens is that, you know, when you have a piece here and a piece there, you're going to make an assessment based on the intelligence you have. But it's never quite complete. Never quite complete. And so what we have to do, and what the Disclosure Project's been doing for a third of a century, is collecting all these little pieces from 1,000 points of information who are whistleblowers that I've debriefed and met with over the third of a century.
Stop. Pause. We're 4 minutes and 15 seconds. 4 minutes. We're not even 5 minutes into this thing, and he's already talked about his team and briefing a bunch of people. Stephen Greer really wants to make this about him. It's always got to be about him. Why, Steve? We get it. Everybody knows that you worked hard at this. Like everybody knows. But give it some room to breathe. It's not about you, man. He goes on to make a great point, which I think is Jake Barber only knows what he knows. So he only knows what he was read into, and he only knows what he saw and experienced on his missions where he encountered these things. But that's a very limited window of time with the object, with the thing. And you're only shown what you need to know to complete the mission that you're given. According to Stephen Greer, who, as he just said, has been doing this for 30 plus years. And again, with Stephen, it's always only him. Only he has the full mosaic. He's got the yarn board with the pictures and the thumbtacks in his palatial estate someplace. There's got to be some kind of yarn room, conspiracy room. I just noticed this. So what it sounds like to me is, it sounds like Stephen Greer has been out there for a couple of weeks now, pumping up his whistleblowers as like, this is going to be the thing. This is going to be the big reveal. And then Jake Barber shows up on News Nation, and it's Ross Coulthart doing the interview. Ross does the big reveal, puts this whole thing out. Stephen Greer puts out his podcast just today, 17 hours ago. And in his podcast refers to Ross's show as a tabloid show. I don't know if you caught that, but he says it's a tabloid show. And he kind of downplays the whole show. And then the next thing he says is, and by the way, this guy doesn't even know the whole picture. Only I know the whole picture. And I'm telling you, there's more to this than meets the eye. Well, yeah, duh. But at the same time, like, he's firsthand, like, he was there. So it sounds like Stephen Greer lost control of the story somewhere. Like, this got out of it sounds like maybe they were working with him initially. He says that I introduced Jake Barber to the rest of my guys, and he said, I've been working with this guy for a little while. Let's go a little bit further into this clip and see what else he has to say. Let's go another minute.
And try to put this picture, this mosaic together, because what you'll find is that someone like Mr. Barber and his guys were read into a very specific operation, and even that operation, they had a specific task. And he will tell you this, and he was not read in to what was going on, for example, where those craft went and then what happened to them. He knows, he's spoken to people, but his firsthand knowledge is very specific. So what I've had to do by connecting the dots of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these type of whistleblowers over the decades, and you'll see this if you go to dpiarchive.com, there's 762 listed. Now,
not dparchive.com. Don't go to dpr. Go to dpiarchive.com. Not the other one. It's a different archive.
Their names are redacted because they've not agreed to come forward like Jake Barber has and his guys. But what the bigger problem is, if you only have that slice of the picture, even if you've been an operator, a special forces operator in that world for decades or a couple decades, you're not going to necessarily know the whole mosaic. And so that's where you get into trouble. And that's where I've seen many of these whistleblowers, they get caught up in a media effort like this was, that then puts in spurious and unrelated material that actually is not useful and helpful. In fact, it is deleterious to the truth. And we're going to talk about that. One thing about me, love me or hate me, I'm not running for the mayor of Crazy Town, ufology. I'm just going to lay it out there what the truth is, because my responsibilities. I'm here in Washington right now because I have to go to some meetings with the incoming administration figures. And there's a...
What? Okay. I'm going to stop there. All right. Just so you know, we're 6 minutes in. If you want to pick up the rest of this this podcast, I encourage everyone, go watch it. Don't take my word for it. Watch the whole podcast. Go subscribe to Steven. Steven's putting out a podcast every week now, it looks like. So, and so is Lou. So go watch them both and make up your own mind what you think. But it sounds, we're 6 minutes in and he's like, I've got to go brief the president, members of the new administration. I'm in Washington right now. I don't know, man. It just sounds like this happened and he didn't get to like own it, and he's frustrated. This is just my first blush reaction to this. But yeah, I don't like, it's kind of weird the way that he disses Ross and he disses the show, and he calls it a tabloid show. And he, less than 90 seconds into this podcast, he's already talking about how this thing flipped out of control. And it was going to happen one way, and it was going to be Steven's way. And then it happened a different way. And this is why that's all fucked up. And it's because no one has the full picture except Stephen Greer. And he's the only one who can really speak to that, because he's the only one who's been looking at this and no one else has been paying attention. So I don't know. I maybe I'm too hard on Stephen Greer. I don't think so. I think I'm asking honest questions. And I think these are questions that I would ask him. I'm not intimidated by Stephen Greer. He's a guy. Okay. How does he know that he's not compromised? How does he know that half the whistleblowers that he's talked to aren't misinformation agents? What if he's got, 10, 20 misinformation, disinformation agents mixed in with he probably definitely does. There's gotta be. You don't think they would target Stephen Greer and go after him like the intelligence guys wouldn't go after him? How do we know he's not an asset? We don't know. So again, ask questions, use your critical thinking skills, think about it. The whole point of Night Shift is not for me to tell you what to think. It's for me to just get you thinking and try to get you asking questions of each other. And I want to know what you think, and I want to hear your answers, because I don't know. We're all doing this together. right? So this is all just, we're on the same path together trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And we need to watch these personalities that try to become the center of gravity for the whole conversation. And I've noticed that with Stephen Greer, he's always trying to be at the middle. He wants to be at the core, the center of this whole thing. And I don't know, man. It just seems that just seems weird. There's no, if you've got whistleblowers, bring them forward. If you don't, then don't. But don't hype it up for 3 weeks and then act like your guy jumped ship and then went to some other. It just seems really weird. So anyway, that's the Stephen Greer. That's about as far as I got. So I don't want to go too much farther into that. Now I will say this. I'm gonna pivot from this for just a second, and I'm gonna go to a different clip that I want to show you guys. This is WatchMojo.com. Believe it or not, their YouTube channel just the other day did this was 2 days ago, did an interview. And real quick, before we get into this, please, if you haven't already, smash that like button, smash it, or just push it gently, either way, but hit the like button because it really does help. We're up to 629 concurrent viewers. I really love to get that up to 1,000 every time we do one of these. And YouTube needs to know that you guys love this. So please let YouTube know and goose the algorithm. Give it a like. We're sitting at 181 likes. Let's see if we can get it up to 200 likes. I think we can do that in the next 5 minutes. Okay. Going back to this, Watch Mojo did a 2-hour interview, almost an hour and 42 minutes with Richard Dolan. And I have to tell you, we'll watch a few quick minutes of this, but Richard Dolan is one of the most inspirational figures to me in ufology. He's one of the people that I go to. He's sort of like my go-to guy for when I need a reality check on what's going on, and I want to get a sober, balanced, level-headed assessment of the total picture of ufology and where we're at right now with proper historical context. Richard Dolan is your person. That's who you should check with. Anytime Richard Dolan talks, I listen. He's extremely intelligent. He's extremely well-educated. He's been in this space for as long as anybody, and he's been doing this at a professional level. He teaches courses on this stuff. He's extremely, extremely knowledgeable. And anyway, the point is that in this interview on Watch Mojo, it's basically sort of like the 30,000-foot view of where we are at, where we were historically, where we were up until 2017, what happened in 2017 and brought us to this point, and what the current situation is. And he's got a really great assessment of it. So I want to just show you a quick minute or two of this interview, and I'll put this in the show notes as well. So if you want to check it out, you can.
Politico, which was also a significant article. So it was like this huge explosion in our little community, little at the time. And there has been a major sea change in how we as a society are able to talk about this. So we can now talk about UAP, not UFOs, but UAP in national context without ridicule, without people rolling their eyes, with no X-Files music anymore. All of that is gone. So that's absolutely a positive thing. Now, the question is, where are we now and where is this conversation? So we are able to discuss the fact that there seems to be something real that is unexplained. So that's good. We're still very far from a national conversation about this being a technology that's not from our civilization. We get hints here and there, but we've been dancing around this little subject now for 7 years. I mean, the ET question, or the non-human, the NHI question, has been sitting there in the room for these last 7+ years, and we're still not really addressing it, nor are we really addressing the implications. Like, what does it mean that the United States government has engaged in a 70, 80-year lie to the public about this subject? And we're still not engaging in the questions of, well, where has the rest of our establishment been, like the major media? They're still not, there's no self-examination going on here. The academic community, same thing. So we're in a very, very basic level. On top of that, my own interpretation of why the conversation has opened up. So you have a couple of different perspectives. One is that, which I do not share, which is that this is an op designed from above to roll out a controlled disclosure, kind of like to give the cover up a facelift. There is truth to that, but I think that the reason for this is that we're dealing with a factional struggle within the national security establishment, is my own opinion. So that there have always been individuals who genuinely do believe in some measure of openness and some measure of transparency on the subject. Back in the 1950s till today, it's never really changed. And I just think that this faction has gained a bit more leverage than they've had in the past. Part of that's because of the internet, frankly. And they've just been able to open the space up. They've had some allies in the media, Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal being two key ones there. And so they forced open this space where we can now.
And it's just a ton of insight. We won't watch the whole thing. It's almost 2 hours long, but that interview with Dolan is on point, and he just gives a very sober assessment of the overall picture of things and where we're at today versus where we thought we were. And I love his perspective on this. I think that he's absolutely right. We've been talking about that on this channel, that there is some kind of a factional war going on within the program. And it seems like there are defectors that are coming out forward. And we're seeing that now with these whistleblowers, which brings me to another interesting point that I want to talk about. Because I like this clip because he tees up this idea, and it's something that jumped out at me. And then I saw another clip today, and I saw Matthew Pine say something really similar, and I was just like, oh, okay. I've been saying it on this channel for at least 6 months now. Got to be more than 6 months, almost probably going back to 7-8 months now. The calls are coming from inside the house, right? Like, these people are coming from inside the program. They're leaving. They're jumping ship, the whistleblowers. Why? There's probably more than one reason, but one reason is that they're just sick and tired of it, and they want to relieve themselves of the burden of this uncomfortable information that they have to live with, and these experiences that they know are world-changing, profound, important, significant for all of humanity. I think another reason that this is happening is because of money. I think that there are a lot of very wealthy people who are looking at this, believe that it is real. They don't doubt it. They know it's real. Bob Bigelow, Robert Schmigelo, for those of you, for the night shifters out there, Schmigelo, same thing. He knows it's real, and he's behaving that way. And because when this technology does come out and become commercialized at any level, it doesn't matter how, even if we only get 10% of what there is, it's going to be worth trillions of dollars. And so I think that that's a big part of what's going on here. Now, I've been saying that for a long time. And this morning when I woke up and I looked at my phone, I was going through some things, and I saw a clip from the Good Trouble Show, Matt Ford's excellent show, The Good Trouble Show. If you're not watching it, you should be. If you're not already a subscriber, go there, Matt Ford, The Good Trouble Show, subscribe. There is a clip that he put up from his latest interview with Matt Pines, and Matt Pines, who is sort of a weird unofficial spokesperson for this group, I think. That's my sense. I'm not as up to speed on Matt Pines as I probably need to be. I need to spend some time schooling up on him. But listen to what Matthew Pines has to say about this video and the significance of it. Okay, here we go.
Combined with the fact that you've got multiple, tier one operators coming forward and basically saying we were part of these programs and we're not going to take it anymore. And by the way, we are recruiting from inside your house. We're recruiting people like us that essentially, don't longer feel threatened or loyal to you anymore. That seems like a House of Cards type of situation for the legacy program, right? So that was the thing that I picked up on the most about the video itself, right? And then you can go back into assessing, okay, okay, what is the apparent inertia of the egg? Does it actually have mass? It seems like it does because it's sort of lagging the path of the tether. It seems to roll with a certain amount of momentum. There seems to be artificial lighting on there, right? What seems like a staging area for it to be dropped into its pickup zone. And, it seems to be what it is, right? But I think people are missing out on the most important point, which is like this was a signal sent to the legacy program that we have people willing to share videos like this. Be careful. It might not be the last one.
Yeah, I guarantee you two things. One, there are people in the legacy program that realize that what is going on is un-American, it's illegal, and there are a lot of them that are, it's
1,000,000% what Matt said. Finds 1,000,000%. That is exactly what this was. That's why it wasn't the best video. I knew there was something that just didn't feel right about this video. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but when he said it that way, it's not supposed to be the biggest, best video ever. It's the warning shot. This is the bat signal. That's what this is. This is a 50% warning shot to let them know, like, hey, guess what, dickheads? We have video. We have this video, but imagine what else we're sitting on. And it's letting everybody else know it's time to come forward. It's time. The door is open now. We got a hot chocolate for you. Come on in. Tell us what you got. Spill the beans. We're ready for you. You're not alone. There's a group of us now. The calls are coming from inside the house. I'm excited to watch the rest of this Matt Ford Good Trouble episode because just that quote is so compelling. That mindset is so compelling. It's a warning shot. What's coming next is going to be a step beyond this. And then it'll be ratcheted up another step and ratcheted up another step. And if they're playing their hand, if they have a lot of video, whoever they is, if the faction that's pro-disclosure is sitting on a lot of stuff, they have a lot of leverage, they're going to use that leverage. So we'll see more of this. And maybe this is just the first drip in a catastrophic disclosure. I think they have chosen the path of catastrophic disclosure, and that's what we're going to see now. We're going to start to see, instead of an official, formalized thing, it's going to be this. Unless Donald Trump makes good on a promise he just made. Let's take a look at this clip. I'll play this for you, and then we'll react. Take a look at what Donald Trump has to say about something very interesting.
Radical and foolish executive government, we will also reverse the overclassification of government documents, and in the coming days, we are going to make public remaining records relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and other topics of great public interest. It's all going to be released, Uncle Sam.
That's really interesting. I didn't think it was possible to talk about ending DEI initiatives and Kennedy and Martin Luther King in the same breath, but somehow he figured out a way to do it. Look, I'm not Donald Trump's biggest fan. I've made no secret of that, and there's a number of reasons why I won't get into. But I don't want to divide our community here any more than politics already does. So I would just say this: I hope he sticks to this. I hope he does. I would really like to see it happen. I'm curious to see what he actually does. I'll say this, and I don't think this is out of line. Donald Trump has a history of making promises that he doesn't keep. That's fair. Maybe this time it'll be different. I think there's enough interest in this topic, and I think that there are enough billionaires around now that want to get their hands on this technology that there may be pressure from within to just get on with it and make it happen. We'll see. We'll see. So interesting point. If he declassifies all this stuff about the Kennedys and MLK, and he says other topics that people are interested in, I think we all know what that means. You know, Donald Trump Jr. was just talking about this on his podcast. It remains to be seen if it'll happen, but if it does, that'll be huge, and that'll be a really good thing. And it's something that I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and we'll see. But I don't know yet. It's early days. I am interested in what the big left field sort of surprise news event's going to be. Every presidential administration, usually within the first 90 days, there's almost always some kind of crazy shit that happens that it's like the test. You know, I remember during the Bush, first George W. Bush's first administration, when it was the spy plane got shot down, or was forced to land in China. This was, I think, God, how many years ago was this? There's always something, right? It was an American spy plane. Chinese got a hold of it. And it's this whole thing. So I'm curious to see if that happens, and if it does, what form it takes, and how we all react. But I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think of this? Super chat from Diesel Sauce says the individuals were being brought in and vetted for certain characteristics and the traffic chatter and changes to SOP of our base during that time. I'm not sure what time. What are we referring to? Diesel Sauce. Oh, you had another super chat. Interview was a bit lackluster until the last 20 minutes. That stuff was wild and confirmed things myself and some in my unit heard in the USMC. Wow. Semper Fi. Okay. Yeah, Diesel. Thanks for the super chats. Jenny Safney says, I've really been hoping he'd keep his promise for transparency. Brian Park says he has a track record of making big promises. All I'm saying, yeah, he does. But, you know, every president does. So it's not just him. But he does get a gold star for making bold promises. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how it plays out. Adam Durden says, I'm not a fan, but if he kicks down the door, so be it. Well, he's the president now, so, you know, we're all on the plane and he's flying. I hope he's a good pilot. We'll see. He'll stick to it, but he can be blocked, but not scared, Paris Diamond says. Pat Gallagher, a politician keeping a promise, that would be a first. Brian Park, I love your positive optimism, Clint. Avi Z is here. Hey, Avi, you're late, but you're here. That's all that matters. You can catch up later. Justice says, I will not hold my breath. Cosmic Serpent says, if anyone would disclose, it's probably Trump. He's so unpredictable. Blah, 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 blah. I have strong reason. Brian Jackson says, hey, Brian, I have strong reason to believe Jake's private contract was with Northrop Grumman. Jake Barber's contract as his own company to go do recoveries, UFO recoveries. That's a whole nother interesting wrinkle to this that we haven't even really gotten to yet, which is like, isn't he doing this on this, like, as his main private business now? Doesn't he say in that interview, he's doing it so that different companies can maintain what he calls plausible deniability? So his team of special forces guys, they're literally like the A-team almost. They go out and they run these missions, kind of like mercenary missions, and they do recoveries for private companies. So that would suggest that, I guess that means that you have military crash retrievals and then you have private corporate crash retrievals happening separate sometimes, and sometimes maybe in tandem with each other. I don't know. We did a video last week of Lance Corporal John Wygant, another Marine, who was very, vocal about, in one interview, about his experience in Peru in 1995 or 1996 at a crash retrieval in Peru, where he was sent out with his unit to secure a crash site. They were told that a friendly aircraft went down and they need to go secure the site until another team could arrive to take control of the site and the situation. And in Lance Corporal John Wegant's story, he describes being one of the only guys to get down onto the ridge where this ship had crashed. And he describes it like an egg-shaped craft. He says he draws a picture of it. It looks like an egg. He says that now his description, it's not white, but it is that kind of a shape. He describes it almost more like an avocado, actually, I would say. He said that it was black, and if you shined a light on it, it wouldn't cast a reflection. And weirdly, there was no shadow underneath it. It didn't cast a shadow either. And he said it was this big egg-shaped thing that was enormous. He said, his quote, it was big, man. Crashed into the side of a mountain. He gets there. Purple ooze is dripping out of this thing. He gets some of it on him. It's all over the foliage. Everything's all burnt up and broken and jacked up all around him. He gets some of this stuff on his camis. It burns the hair off his arm. He apparently later goes on to develop a number of health issues because of this exposure to this strange chemical. He describes it as a purplish green that changes every time you look at it. And when you look at it, it doesn't hold its color he just has this really bizarre description of what it looks like. So it's constantly shifting and changing. And he says that in his story, when he climbs back up to go rejoin his unit, his sergeant is yelling at him and they're like, get back out of here, come back up to us. He climbs back up. And when he gets there, he says there is a crash retrieval team already there. He says there's like 30 guys getting off they landed 2 Chinook helicopters in a clearing in the jungle. Huge Chinook helicopters, 2 of them, each one with a pilot, a co-pilot, a crew chief. There's 3 guys on each chopper at least. Then he says there's like 30 guys in hazmat suits. They come off the helicopters. They go to the craft. They're all sealed up in these really high-tech hazmat suits. He says that a bunch of these like SEAL Team, Delta Force, Ninja Commandos, all in black, get off, arrest him, take him to a base. They zip tie him to a cot, put him on the helicopter. Then he says an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel says, we're going to throw you out of the helicopter in the jungle. We're going to just drop your ass off in the jungle and disappear you unless you sign these papers. He gets taken back to a base where he's held there for I think he says a week or 2. I think he's like 2 weeks at this base. And when he gets there, what does he describe? He says he sees Chinese military. He sees German people. He sees Americans. He sees people from a bunch of different countries all working at this base, all at the same place, all at the same time, as part of somehow related to this retrieval program. And that's not the first time that's been brought up. Dan Burrish talked about something similar. I think Bob Lazar even mentioned it once or twice. It's come up again and again at S4. I was thinking it was Dan Burrish. Brian, was it Dan who said there was a Russian helicopter that they used to transport sometimes around the base? They would take this old Russian helicopter back and forth. What is it called? Oh, he said the name of it. I can't remember. Big Russian gunship helicopter. So yeah, man. Big Aerospace. Justice says Big Aerospace. That makes perfect sense to me. Why wouldn't you? If you were an aerospace company, you can hire your own private military contractors. You can give them whatever they need. You can give them a budget. You can give them, all the resources they need. And then you could send them out to do retrievals. Why wouldn't you? So the other thing that John Wegant said that was really interesting was the people who showed up at this crash retrieval site were Department of Energy. And the way that he knows that is because when he was there watching them get off the helicopter, he said some of these guys were wearing those windbreaker jackets that say DOE on the back, the Department of Energy, Delta Oscar Echo. And, the Trinimac, thank you. The Soviet Mi-24 Hind helicopter. That's right, according to Burrish. I asked someone else about why that would even be there. Like, why would this Soviet helicopter be on the base, A, and B, why would they be using that to get around? And somebody, I don't know if this is real or not, but it's real that someone told me this, but I don't, if anybody else out there can check me. Somebody suggested that the reason they would use that is because it would survive an EMP attack. Like there's something about the electronics on board are not sophisticated enough. Or it's an old enough piece of machinery that it could function even if it were hit with an EMP. I don't know if that's true. If anybody else has any other ideas on why they would use a Soviet Hind helicopter at S4 to get around, I'm curious. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. But if that's the case, couldn't you use, like, I don't know, some old Hueys or like old American helicopters? Like, I don't know. Curious. It's interesting, the whole Trump thing, too, because if Trump were to, it's like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. What if he comes in, commander in chief, and he says, I want all this declassified, and I want to tell the American people, open the vault, open the files. How could they even tell him no? Who's going to say no to Donald Trump? Who's going to go to him and go, no, we can't do that. We're not going to, we won't follow that order. If history is any guide, anytime someone has told him, no, I won't do that, he just fires that person immediately. He hires someone who will do that, and then he gets them to do it. And if that person doesn't do it, then he fires them, and he'll do this until he gets somebody in there that'll do what he wants. Could that be in the cards? His whole first cabinet in his first administration wasn't there by the end of his first, everyone, it was like a revolving door. By the end, 90% of the people had been cycled out, and some more than once. So I don't know. He seems like the only type of person who just wouldn't care what anybody told him. He would just order it done and expect it to be done. And if it wasn't done, then he would start firing people until it got done. So I don't know. I'm curious how the legacy program would do that. How would they exercise control over somebody that's such a wild card? How do you go to him and go, no, we can't do that? Or no, we won't do that? What do you guys think? Do you think somebody would tell Donald Trump, absolutely not, we're not going to declassify the UFO files, or we can't do that? Do you think they would try to convince him that they can't do it, or that it shouldn't be done? Would they, in other words, try to talk him out of it? Or would they try to, I just imagine that he's got so many other things going on. I mean, the president of the United States is the busiest person in the world, or at least they should be, right? How does this fit into everything else that's going on? Is this just something that, he says on day one, and then it goes out there and just never happens, just dies in the ether? Pat Gallagher says, Clint, please, Trump is not in charge. Elon's in charge. Everybody knows that. He bought his way into the government. He spent $100 million, and now he gets to go in and cut regulation anywhere he wants. He gets to cut departments. Any department he doesn't think is important, he'll just cut it. Anybody that would regulate his businesses, he gets to go in and decide that they're not efficient enough, and then get rid of them. Elon's in charge. That's what I think. Justice says, wasn't Kennedy going to do that? Allegedly, Kennedy was. I believe Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, was going to address the UAP topic. At one point, somebody from the Kennedy campaign did reach out to me, and we had a whole conversation about how the campaign should handle this. what should they do and how should that conversation go? And I gave my opinion, and it wasn't too much longer before RFK dropped out of the race, so that conversation didn't materialize into anything. But I think I can say that the conversation happened, because it did. And it was interesting that it happened the way that it did. But I had a call with someone from the campaign, and we had about an hour-long conversation about this, why it was important, and why it should be taken seriously. And I don't know. Linda Collins says they will try to talk him out of it, but he only has these 4 years. I think he's going to try to make history. Well, this is something else that Richard Dolan talks about in that podcast that I showed you the clip from. He brings this up, and it's apropos because obviously it's Inauguration Day, and Jimmy Carter died recently, who truly was an amazing humanitarian. You could say what you want about Jimmy Carter's political career. I think he was an amazing human being. He's the type of leader that we need more of. He put people first, and he was very famously. There's a famous story that he was shown, and Richard Dolan has this on good authority, and so I take Richard's word for it that it's legit, that Jimmy Carter was shown or was briefed on the situation and vis-a-vis non-human intelligence visiting Earth. And he was seen shortly after this briefing in his office, in the Oval Office, alone, with his head in his hands, weeping. And then after he's president, he goes on and spends the rest of his life trying to help poor people. Like, that's all he does. This guy was 100 years old almost. He was out there hammering nails, working on building houses for poor people. And wow. What was he told? He said that he would make the truth available to the public, but then he was shown something and he was told something that freaked him out, obviously, and he never did. So what happened? Will they try to do something like that to Donald Trump? And what could you even tell him? I don't know, man. He's such a wild card. Yeah, somber. Brian Park says somber. It's kind of what Lou Elizondo alluded to, right? Somber. If you knew. Interestingly, Lou said when he was asked this on Theories of Everything, this is like 4 years ago now, how would people feel? Kurt Jamunkel asked Lou Elizondo. He said, how would people feel if they knew what you know? And Lou Elizondo chews on this for like 10 seconds. It feels like an hour. He sits there quietly and he thinks about it. And then he just goes, somber. And then he goes, I think people would spend more time with their families. That's what you should do. Spend time with people you love. And it was super creepy the way he said it, because he was saying something that was really sweet and true. But he was saying it like what you would say to someone who was just diagnosed with a terminal illness. With, like if you wanted to tell someone bad news, but you didn't want to say it, and you were just like, you know what? Why don't you take the next 6 months and just spend time with your family? You know what I mean? It was kind of like that. It hit like that. That's how it landed for me. And it actually gave me a chill the way he said it, because the somber comment by itself wasn't, in and of itself wasn't that shocking. It was the next remark after that where he goes into this whole thing about spend time with your family, spend time with your loved ones. And it's like, hold on a second. What do you know, dude? What do you know? If you're somber and you want us to spend more time with our family, what's coming? That was right around the same time that John Ramirez came out and said 2027 was going to be the big year. Then just recently, a few weeks ago, Chris Bledsoe comes out and he said it in his book, but he mentioned it again. And also Chris Bledsoe is going to be on the Bledsoe Said So podcast coming up Wednesday, if I remember right. So mark your calendars, gang. The man himself, he said that 2026 is going to be the year. Corbell is on, is it Tubi now? Tubi or not Tubi? I forget where the UFO Revolution show, whatever that show was. Corbell is now saying that Blue Beam is going to be the next big story. Or he alludes to that. What he says is that we're going to be told a craft is coming to Earth. It's en route. It's on its way here, and it'll be here soon. And then that's going to start that's going to kick off a series of things that now are going to happen in order, like check, right down the list of us responding to that knowledge with a ticking time clock attached to it. Ross Coulthart used that term actually about 3 years ago. He said there's a ticking clock attached to this program, to this conversation, referring to disclosure. He said there's a ticking clock attached to this. And then he didn't go any further. In another interview with Kurt Jamungle, Leslie Keene said, I don't like to think more than a few years ahead because I think after a few years from now, things aren't going to be like what we're used to. We're not going to have, Leslie Keene's words were, we're not going to have access to the things that we're used to having access to. The abundance that we're used to, those things, like we won't have access to that. And she said, I don't like to plan too far ahead because I think I've talked to enough people in the next few years. I think things are going to get pretty, I'm paraphrasing, but she basically said, I think in the next few years, things are going to get crazy, for lack of a better term. And to his credit, Kurt actually pushes her on this issue and says, what do you mean? Like electricity? We're going to have to do without electricity? Like, what are we going to have to do without? And she goes, it's going to be difficult. And then she refuses to go any further into it. John Lear on George Knapp's program back in the 80s was saying some huge event was going to happen. Has anybody looked at Dan Burrish's website today? What are we looking at on eaglesdisobey.net? Somebody bought.com. Nope, it's the same. It's the same site as before. I guess he hasn't done an update. Same music video. I just opened up Dan Burrish's website, eaglesdisobey.net. Justice, she said as well that angels are real, but from a religious studies platform. Paris Diamonds, referring to Leslie Keane's quote in that Kurt Jamungle podcast, things that make our lives comfortable, she said, will be no longer. Tom DeLonge, that's another one. Yeah, Tom DeLonge. Justice says Tom DeLonge also made these statements. Yep. Now, John Lear, Zoltan says John Lear said it will occur in the 90s, and I that is fair. He said within 5 years, I think, on his appearance on George Knapp's show. He said it will be within 5 years. They think something's going to happen. But I don't know if that was he talking about the same thing everybody else is talking about? Or something else? Pat Gallagher, indigestible. Was that Jim Simivan who said indigestible? I think it was. Jim Simivan, former CIA. The truth is indigestible. That's a really weird word to use. I mean, it's a great word, but indigestible tells me nothing, but tells me a lot. What does indigestible mean? My fear, my concern is that the religious connotations that surround the high strangeness aspect of the phenomenon are a control mechanism, not in the Jacques Vallée sense, but a control mechanism in the sense of a programmed, it's a cultural programming that they are going to leverage, they being the NHI. This is just a hypothesis, this is speculation here, that they're going to leverage at the point of contact, right? So take yourself in your mind, imagine a superior civilization, superior in technology, superior in wisdom, superior in all aspects, just far beyond where we're at, making contact officially with us. It's not a settled question that this is a 100% benign thing or that these are peaceful beings necessarily. There's enough different perspectives and points of view and stories that we can look at that we can say, I think confidently, that no one person really knows, and that there is a lot of disagreement about what the objectives and motives are of the NHI beings that people are coming into contact with. However, if you look at experiencer cases or abductee cases and you listen to these individuals explain their stories and their encounters, we get a mixed bag, right? Like a really mixed bag of what they're here for, which suggests to me that, and Richard Dolan has said something similar many times, that we're not just dealing with one type of NHI, we're dealing with multiple types that have different goals and objectives. And then there's our own internal systems, which have their own objectives too. The private sector, corporations, the government, the military, not just ours, but all around the world, different militaries, different governments. There's a lot of different agendas, all overlapping in the same space, playing out in the same world. So it could be that there's something sinister happening. Bob Dean, said that when he was doing his research, or when he was working with NATO, I think it was in the 1960s, that he came into contact with a briefing document that said that humanity and Earth was the subject of a survey and study by these beings. And the most alarming thing that he found was that they mentioned in this document that the top command people in NATO and in the American military were most terrified of the beings that look just like us, the ones that look just like us. They could sit next to you in a room. They could sit next to you in a restaurant. They could sit across from you, and you wouldn't know they were not human, but they're not. Or at least if they are human, they're not from here, if that makes sense. I still want to see the dots connected between abductions and everything else we're talking about. I find that too fascinating to leave on the back burner. I don't know why no one else is talking about it, but very few people are. I can't find anyone who's dealing with abductions right now. We are going to start dealing with it in a more direct way. We've got some guests coming up that are going to address that directly. And I want to talk to people who have had direct experiences. If someone out there wants to share their experience, I'd be interested in hearing from you. But even Stephen Greer's, one of his own whistleblowers, in fact, I think it was more than one whistleblower, one person that he interviewed, said that they knew in the program, this person was part of the legacy program, they knew that they were abducting us to make hybrids. There was a agenda to create a hybrid go-between sort of middle ground type of being that would look human, but would be loyal to the NHI or influenced or controlled by the NHI. That this Ross Coulthard thing where he talks about the psionics team, it just reminds me again of all of the different stories you hear, especially surrounding Hal Puthoff over the years of the consciousness studies, the Stargate program, the telepaths, the remote viewers, all the stuff that Ingo Swann talks about, the things that he saw. In particular, in his book Penetration, he says he's at a grocery store in Los Angeles. He goes into a grocery store. He's going to throw a dinner party for some friends. And he goes into this grocery store to pick up, ingredients for the dinner party. And he's in the produce department. And he describes, my copy of the book it's in the other room. He describes, I'm going to pull an interview he did on Coast to Coast. I'm going to find it for you guys. I'm going to play it for you. But if you go on YouTube and look up Coast to Coast AM, Ingo Swann, search that term. And if you can't find it on YouTube, go to DuckDuckGo and do a search for Ingo Swann, Coast to Coast AM, and do a video search. And listen to his interviews with George Norrie and Art Bell. Art Bell. He talks about being in this grocery store, and he says he looks over and he sees this woman. And he describes her as being like the just unbelievably beautiful woman, like next level, off the charts. Like she's a 12 on the 10 scale. And she's just like, he describes her as like falling out of her top. He goes into this whole like sexual description of like how attractive this woman is. And which is interesting because Ingo, I'm pretty sure is gay, right? I think he was openly gay for most of his life. But he's like, I had to get closer to this woman just to see how like hot she was. She was so hot. And he's describing this. And then he says he looks over and he sees an intelligence guy that he recognizes standing across the grocery store. And then he looks over and he sees another guy that is identical. He calls these guys the twins. Two guys that are his sort of like handlers, I guess. Like he's got a handler named, what's the guy's name? Ingo's, he has a one-word name that he goes by, and I cannot remember it. Somebody in the chat tell me if you remember. But these two guys are watching this woman, and Ingo gets a signal from one of them that he's got to go. Like, you got to get out of here right now. And he leaves. And then later he is told to go to, I think it's Grand Central Terminal, and go to a payphone. They take him to a payphone, and he goes up to this payphone, and one of the twins is there. Now he's back in New York. This is later. And he's he's dressed up like a homeless person. He signals him with a card. He says, like, come with me. And they go down a hallway. They go to a payphone, and Ingo goes into the phone booth, and he picks up the phone, and a voice on the other end, Axelrod, that's the guy's name, Axelrod. He says, do you know who you saw at the grocery store? Why were you there? First of all, they want to know, like, what were you doing there? Why were you there? Do you know who this woman was? And she was wearing big sunglasses. Ingo describes her as wearing big, gigantic sunglasses. And he says, no, I didn't know who she was. I was there to get ingredients for a dinner party. And Axelrod says, that was a hybrid. And they're extremely powerful telepaths. And that particular one is super dangerous, extremely dangerous. How close did you get? Did you notice if she read your thoughts? Could you tell, he's having this whole discussion back and forth about this woman who looks mostly human, but weird. And apparently super hot. And then she's also extremely dangerous. So there seems to be, I know this sounds insane, and I know how wild this is, but there seems to be a connection between the abduction cases of the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and this sort of weird appearance of telepaths that seem to have abilities to reach into your head and put thoughts there. Jim Semivan talked about that too. He said, how do I explain this to people? How do I explain to a 5-year-old kid? How can I tell a kid that your thoughts aren't your own? You can't like keep them private. He said this really weird cryptic sidebar comment once in an interview, and he talked about it like, I don't know how I could tell. How do you tell people that everything they think is not private, that their thoughts are accessible? And I couldn't quite figure it out at the time what he was talking about, but now I think I know. So anyway, this is a very long, convoluted story, but the point being, I think that there is more than meets the eye here. We are scratching the surface of the tip of an iceberg, and the disclosure conversation is only a piece of this puzzle. At the end of the day, whether or not disclosure happens, people are still having contact with these beings. They're still being taken on board craft. Some people are having benign contact experiences. Some people are having terrifying contact experiences. Some people are having positive contact experiences. But something is going on. People are being brought on board, taken on board craft, taken somewhere. Things are being done to them. They're being returned. And we don't know how many people this is happening to. We don't know what the numbers are, but they are probably bigger than we think. David Jacobs said that in his interview with Richard Dolan, he said that it's a lot higher than people think. Based on their internal math that his group worked up, it's a lot more than you think. If you knew how many it was, it would freak you out. That people who have been taken. So that's where I want to go next with the channel. I think that's where I want to go next. I want to talk more about telepathy. I want to talk more about the psionics team. I want to talk more about remote viewing. I want to talk more about abductees, abductions, hybrids, the high strangeness aspect of it, and how all of that ties into disclosure. Because after disclosure, if we get disclosure, chaotic or otherwise, we're going to have to come around to the topic of abductions. And how do you square that circle? How do you tell people that at any point, any time, day or night, you can be taken from anywhere? It's pretty fucked up. It's not the best documentary, but if you watch the Manhattan Alien Abduction on Netflix, listen to how the little boy describes when he saw his mom being abducted. This little boy wakes up. They interview him as an adult. And he says he walks out into the room and he freaks out because his mom is catatonic and she's staring out the window. All these different witnesses see this woman come out of her building. She floats through the glass. I talked to a friend of mine over the weekend. Remember last week, I don't know if any of you were watching last week, I mentioned that I had a weird moment with my son on a week ago Saturday. And we were outside in the morning and we were and I'm not saying this happened to me for sure. I just said I had a weird experience with my kid. And he looked at me and he said something really creepy out of a Steven Spielberg movie. And it's 8:00 in the morning. I've got my coffee. Saturday morning. We're outside. I'm pushing him on the swing. It's quiet. It's a beautiful morning. The sun's just coming up. We're listening to the birds. He's looking up. It's one of those, it's a swing, but it looks like a little round pancake kind of a thing with a net on it. So you can lay on it. He's laying on it. He's looking up at the sky. He's looking up at the trees, and we're quiet for like 5 straight minutes. And we're just enjoying this morning. And then out of nowhere, he looks at me and he goes, "Daddy, I saw you on the roof last night." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "You were on top of the house last night. I saw you." And I said, "What?" I said, "Daddy wasn't on top of the house last night. Daddy didn't go up." The only time he's ever seen me climb a ladder up to the roof is one time. He was 2 years old and I climbed the ladder to fix something. And I was up there for like 5 minutes. I didn't even go onto the roof. I just went up to where the roof was. I had to fix something. And then I climbed back down. He's never actually seen me on the roof of our house, but he looked at me and he said, "Daddy, I saw you on the roof." So a friend of mine calls me up over the weekend. He texts me and he goes, "Dude, I have to tell you this story. Can we talk?" And I go, "Yeah." And so I call him and he goes, "When my son was 5 years old, he told me something that sounded almost exactly like what your kid told you." And I go, "Well, what did he tell you?" And he goes, "Well, He said he woke up in the middle of the night and the little boy, and he saw his dad walking down the hall and walking into a mirror. He said he walked right into a mirror and then disappeared. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah. And he said something about like, you were surrounded by blue light. You were all blue. And then you went into this mirror. And I was like, fuck, that's really weird. Jim Sparks, another abductee. He wrote a book called The Keepers. If you go on DuckDuckGo and do a search for Jim Sparks, video search, put his name in quotes, watch his presentation. He talked about being put into a hypnotic state and then walking through a plate glass window, right through it, straight out the other side, and then being brought back in the same way and leaving footprints on the carpet that would come through a glass window. It was like a floor to ceiling window, like at a patio, you know, when you get like a lanai. And then the footprints coming in had like dew from the grass outside, morning dew and bits and pieces of little grass and stuff on his bare feet that walked through the glass. And there was he said he remembers very specifically, there was one footprint that was halfway in the glass and halfway outside the glass, as if he phased right through it. Jake Barber, in his interview with Ross Coulthart, talked about seeing objects go straight into the ground and come straight out of the ground or out of a mountain, right out, or then come back into, you know, go right through it. So we see these common threads of like really strange instances, people coming into contact with these beings, being passed through physical matter as if it weren't even there, like it's fog. They just go right through it and come out the other side. And then you hear these tales about, like Jake Barber said, of craft being not just transmedium in the sense of they go from space to the atmosphere to water, but if they can do that, why not just go straight through the ground? Can they shoot straight through the earth and pop out the other side? Can they do that? Can they phase themselves? Can they go out of phase with matter and then go straight through it? I don't know. I've heard enough people talk about this now that it's really, really weird and it's super interesting. Okay, gang. Wow. We're going to have to end it there. The time flew by so fast. It's already 4:07. That's my time for today. We got to wrap it up. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's our show. We'll be back on Friday. We'll do a deeper dive into this whole thing. We'll have Xander back on deck, and our team will hopefully be fully operational. We'll try to get to the bottom of this thing, see if we can solve it once and for all. I hope you'll join us. What else is happening? That's it for now. Yeah, I'll give you some more news on Friday. Hopefully this week we learn some more. We get some more information. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you for watching. Thanks for being a part of the show. Thanks for being a part of the conversation, the most interesting conversation happening anywhere on the planet. If you are here, you are a part of Team Night Shift. And I can't thank you enough for watching. And thank you for being a subscriber if you're a subscriber. If you're not, please consider becoming a subscriber. And if you are a subscriber and you want to support the show in some other interesting way, you can become a member. If you don't want to do that, that's okay. Take a look at the Night Shift website. You can go there and you can pick up a cool piece of merch and you can support the show that way. We've got awesome, awesome merch. And I can't recommend it enough. Get yourself a mug, get a hoodie, get a hat, get a t-shirt. Free shipping on the Night Shift official logo tee. Always free shipping. Pick up a beer glass. These are really good. Grab one of these. Anyway, that can support the show. Or you can just be cool with us and share these videos anywhere you think they might be appreciated. And where did my tab go? There we go. And let's see. Any other last little thoughts, guys? No? Okay. So we're going to wrap it there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep looking up.
lights in the sky. Don't you leave me behind. No, I've been waiting for so long to know that we're not alone. No, we're not
excitement kind of turned to dread at some point. The amount of power we're dealing with is astronomical. To affect gravity like this equipment does takes huge amounts of power. The power levels are like I said, astronomical.